Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. Welcome to this final Sunday afternoon talk for the Rains Retreat of 2022. The theme for the afternoon's talk today is Sīla, a new definition of intelligence. As I've mentioned a few times already, I don't come up with all of the titles for these talks. I think there was 175 suggestions this year, and I fished through them, and then the ones that look most interesting are the ones that I pick out. And this one I felt was a very suitable, useful subject, and also a good one to finish the year's the presentations on, since it's an area that say can be significant, can impact us all. So we're probably all familiar with the idea of intelligence or IQ, the intelligence quotient, and ways of measuring a person's cleverness or brightness. That's been around since the early part of the 20th century, I believe. But in 1995, an American psychologist and teacher called Dan Goleman wrote a book called Relational Intelligence, and that sent quite a few waves through the American therapeutic and spiritual and self-help realms, because it was presenting a different way of understanding what we mean by intelligence. And emotional intelligence, if I can remember correctly, as Dan Goleman put it, it's to do with how we function as a whole being. It's not just our cleverness or our ability to solve problems, but how we deal with emotional states, how we deal with success and failure, gain and loss, happiness and unhappiness, health and sickness, and so on and so forth. So it's taking a more fully integrated perspective on a human life, not just our mental abilities, because probably most of us have been familiar, maybe even in our own lives. We've known people who are extremely intelligent, but very unhappy or very unable to look after themselves socially, or very awkward socially, or very unhappy, or people who have got very high qualifications, gone off to college, and have fallen apart, or even attempted suicide or committed suicide. Because even though their brilliant mind is something that's very clearly measurable, their sense their discomfort in the world and their inability to deal with aspects of their own being and life around them is something very, very significant. So emotional intelligence as an idea was a very significant impact in the late 90s. I think a very valuable addition to the Western understanding of things. Also, I would say Dan Goleman is one who can speak very much in the language of Western psychology, but it's also something of an undercover Buddhist teaching as well. So even though it's not put into Buddhist or spiritual language, I would say a lot of what he was putting forward are very central Buddhist principles about how to understand your mind, understand your character, how to work with emotions and instincts, feelings, and to live as a more well-rounded person. So with that as the background, then considering how things have evolved since the late 90s, particularly in the Western psychological field and in the Western world. So in the early part of this 21st century, then the subject of mindfulness, or the quality of mindfulness, has been something that's been seen around much, much more, and has had a big impact on the world. Around about the time that, or before that, Dan Goleman had written that book in 1995, John Kabat-Zinn had launched a program in the medical center where he worked in Massachusetts called Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction, MBSR. And that, again, had a very, very big impact. It was a way of presenting, I would say, Buddhist meditational methods and reflective methods in a Western language, and made it very accessible to many, many people, very helpful, very effective. And then after a number of years of mindfulness-based stress reduction being available to people, a number of folks thought, well, it would be good to be able to develop this quality of mindfulness as a way of dealing particularly with depression and overactive thinking. And so there were three people in particular developed this what's called mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, MBCT. Mark Williams, Zindel Siegel, and John Teasdale. And this, again, I would say, based thoroughly on Buddhist principles, but put into a language and put into a form that's very accessible and non-partisan, also not in a religious or so classically spiritual language. And I like to mention how John Teasdale, who was one of the three researchers who developed this, he said that it was really the impact of listening to a Dhamma talk by Lumpur Sumedho at Oxford University Buddhist Society, when Lumpur Sumedho made two particular points about thinking that hit John Teasdale very strongly. He said, our thoughts are not true, and they're not really ours. So John apparently took those two principles away from that talk, thought, how can we weave that into mindfulness-based stress reduction? How can we develop a method that picks up on those two things? Our thoughts are not true, and they're not really who and what we are. They're not really ours. And so that was one of the contributing themes to mindfulness-based cognitive therapy. So, and I think it was because of the impact of that particular approach, particularly in treating depression, recurrent depression, that is one of the reasons why we see mindfulness around a lot in the world these days. Just to have a little digression into medical history. So up until about, I think, 2005 or 2007, if a person had a recurrent experience of depression, like they had periods of depression that had returned, there was a 5 to 10% possibility of them be recovering. So 90% of people, 95% of people would continue to have episodes of depression throughout the rest of their life. Only 5% or 10% of people managed to be cured, whether it was through surgery, medication, therapy, psychoanalysis, any method whatsoever. Over the previous 100 years, nothing had worked to counteract recurrent depression with a more than 5 to 10% success rate. When they applied this method of mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, it had a 50% success rate. So the initial reaction of the academic community was, "This can't be right. You must have fudged your results, or this can't be defendable. This is a 500% increase of success rate. It can't be right." So they ran the tests again on a different population of people. The first lot was here in the UK, the second lot was in America, and they got the same results. That's when mindfulness became a big talking point all around the world, because this was suddenly something that seemed to have a powerful effect where other things had not had such a positive effect for many, many years. So then, not to go too deeply into all of that, stay on the subject of Sīla as a new definition for intelligence. So then, out of mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, particularly for depression, then the mindfulness field expanded and started talking more about compassion and the ability of mindfulness practices, not just to help the individual, but how it can support a compassion for yourself and a compassion for other beings. So it was something that, again, publications started to appear, say 10, 15 years ago, roughly. So mindfulness and compassion, mindfulness-based compassion practices were coming into the field. So all the way along, however, one of the things that was continually being left out of these mindfulness programs was behavior, was Sīla, or ethics. And I had a number of conversations over the years, particularly with John Kabat-Zinn, but also with others, and asking, well, why do you leave out Sīla? Because you obviously draw upon Buddhist teachings, Buddhist principles very strongly for the meditation techniques and the background to these methods, and they're so helpful for so many people. How come you leave out the aspect of behavior and the effect of our conduct and our actions and speech that has on our mind? And it seems that it's very deliberate. It's quite an explicit, deliberate move to leave it out. And it seems to be because, this isn't a critique about MBSR and so on, but it seems, as you have in Western therapeutic methods, that the therapist or the psychiatrist it's not their job, or they're not allowed to make comments about what the person does with their life, or how they make a living, the decisions that they make on a daily basis. That's not the role of the therapist or the psychiatrist to say, you shouldn't be doing this, or if you didn't do this, you would feel better about yourself. Seemingly, I'm not an expert in the field. Maybe there's a few therapists or psychiatrists here who can illuminate, but it seems that it was very deliberately left out of those trainings because of a sense of not being appropriate for a person in a role of therapist or doctor or psychiatrist or teacher to make comments or to say make judgments about a person's behavior, or make a person feel critical about their behavior. So I'll get onto that in a little while. So I not just myself, but many others have had a bit of a difficulty with this. But surely it's so connected. It's such a related area. Isn't that a bit of a mistake to leave that out? How can that be brought in? Because what we have within the Buddhist approach is, what you would say, in terms of these kinds of trainings, or this kind of intelligence, along with regular intellectual intelligence, emotional intelligence, what you can call social intelligence or relational intelligence, is part of what is encouraged in Buddhist practice. So we would call the development of mindfulness and wisdom, how we exist in relationship to the living world, to other people, to animals, and to the living planet, and to our own sense of well-being. So it's what we would call mindfulness and wisdom. In Western psychological terms, you could call a relational intelligence or a social intelligence, how our actions and our speech and our attitudes are working together with the environment that we're a part of, and the beings that we share a life with. And so that within the Buddhist perspective, then the Sīla, it plays a strong part in supporting and encouraging that quality of social intelligence or relational intelligence, how to live harmoniously, how to live with a quality of self-respect and ease within yourself, how to live effectively and harmoniously in society. And so to me, it makes, obviously I'm biased, being a Buddhist monk, it makes perfect sense to realize or to consider how it's, when we're talking about mindfulness-based practices, both if it's to do with relating to our thoughts, relating to our own being, if we're talking about compassion, and we're talking about how we live in the world and how we are a part of a human group, a human society, and part of the living world. We depend upon the animals and plants and other people of this planet. Surely, if we are to find a way of living peacefully and harmoniously, we have to consider the the effects of our choices upon the lives of others. That has to be a part of it, to me. That has to be a part of it. None of us can live in isolation, and our sense of happiness or well-being necessarily is connected with the well-being of the planet, well-being of other creatures. So to me, there's a very so clear message within the Buddha's teachings of understanding or developing a quality of empathy. When we talk about compassion or empathy, empathizing with other living beings, and an appreciation of cause and effect. That our actions have consequences, our attitudes and our words, they have consequences. And if we act in a way which is dishonest or unkind, there'll be consequences. People will mistrust us. People will not respect us. If we tell lies or we harm other beings, then we remember that. If we tell lies, we've got to remember the lies that we've told. Otherwise, it's difficult to keep our untruths lined up with each other, right? If you tell the truth all the time, you don't have to do that. If we're telling lies, we've got to work hard to remember and to sustain the lies, which is stressful and difficult and painful. So in terms of, I would say, Sīla as a new definition of intelligence, I would say that it's an intelligence that's really beneficial for our lives and for the life of the planet is an intelligence that takes into account cause and effect relationships, how one thing affects another. In Buddhist language, idda paccayata, how one thing conditions another. And that to make or to use a definition of intelligence and living intelligently, I would say that is really most effective and most helpful. It needs to be that element of it, that part of it, which includes the appreciation of our actions. If we are kind, if we are harmless, if we are honest, then that has certain effects. That brings a quality of ease and self-respect within us, and it brings a beneficial effect to the beings and the people around us. If we are selfish and unkind, if we're destructive or deceitful, that brings certain effects within us and has certain effects on the beings around us. We can just see right now in the war zones of this planet and the incredibly painful, destructive behaviors that people have engaged in. It's right here in our faces in the daily news. It's almost impossible to avoid this aspect of our lives. So I would say Sīla as a new definition for intelligence and learning, encouraging living intelligently. It's a profound sense or a feeling for what you can call consequential thinking, or seeing how causes and effects work. Now, in classical Buddhist psychology, there are two qualities, hiri and ottappa, that are often talked about as central in terms of guiding our conduct. So, those of you who've walked into the temple today, which is everybody, you might have noticed either side of the doors as you came in. On one side of the door there's a devata with a blue surround, and the other side there's a devata with a reddish pink surround. Those two figures represent hiri and ottappa, and they're there because Lumpur Sumedho requested Pang Chainasai, who was a classical Thai artist, said, we're going to build this new temple at Amaravati, and I'd like to have these images of hiri and ottappa right by the temple door, so that these are there for people to be reminded of as they come in the temple. And it's not that common for hiri and ottappa to be put into sort of symbolic form in this way. It's not, but Lumpur Sumedho had seen that in other monasteries in Thailand, and in the past, and he thought, that's a really good idea. When I build a temple, I want to have hiri and ottappa right by the doors, and so they are these angelic forms, sort of radiant angelic forms, and so they're also known as the bright protectors or the guardians of the world. So hiri and ottappa, they're translated in various different ways. Unfortunately, in the early translations into English, I'm not sure what it's like into German or French or Italian, but the English translation of Hiri and Ottappa were things like moral shame and moral dread, which doesn't really make the heart sing, I would say. Moral shame and moral dread. And so that it has a more of a shriveling effect, like upon the heart, rather than a brightness or a sense of security and protection, but rather as a sense of threat. So I'd say it's a bit of an unfortunate translation. So Hiri is really the quality of conscience or moral sensitivity. So Hiri and Ottappa, they work they protect, just like physical pain protects the body by being uncomfortable. Hiri and Ottappa are psychological qualities, and they protect by being painful. So if you tell a lie, that feeling of, oh, that wasn't really true, or oh, I hope nobody finds out, or that, oh, that wasn't very kind, or that was selfish, or if we act in a way which is aggressive or hurtful towards someone, or dishonest, or we cheat at something, that painfulness in the heart is I would say that is what Hiri is referring to. That without any kind of I'm a terrible person, I shouldn't do this, I hope they don't find out. With putting all of that aside, just the sheer say unwholesomeness of those words, those actions, that brings a painfulness in the heart. So that is a useful pain. Like physical pain, it works by being uncomfortable. Like fear protects us by being unpleasant. So we get to a place where we don't feel fear. You stand back from the edge of the road so you feel comfortable. That's how fear works. It does its job by being unpleasant. So Hiri and Ottappa, similarly, they work by being unpleasant mental states. So Hiri is that wasn't really true, or that wasn't very kind, or that had a painful result, or that came from a selfish, destructive place. Ow. Ottappa is translated in somewhat different ways. Sometimes it's used to whereas Hiri refers to our own actions in the past, then the quality of Ottappa refers to a fear of consequences, or what Ajahn Amaro calls a wise fear of consequences. Like, if I step out into the road, the cars are going to have to avoid me, and I might get hit. So let's be cautious and let's be not be rash. So a wise fear of consequences is one way of translating Ottappa. Another meaning it has is not just in relationship to our own actions, but it's the off-putting quality of the unskillful actions of other people. When you see someone else being destructive or deceitful or acting in abusive or dishonest ways, again, that's terrible, that's horrible. How can people do that? That painfulness in the heart is related to Ottappa. And again, it's a painfulness. That's how it works. That's its signal, is saying this is unhelpful. This is destructive. This is cruel. This is not compassionate. Ow! So that they work by being painful. So I feel it's helpful to understand that these are, say, that if we're going to develop that social intelligence or relational intelligence based on Sīla, then Hiri and Ottappa, they're the kind of the main tools that we can use for that. They're the kind of driving force for that protection. Now, one of the I would say the reasons why Western psychology in the therapeutic realm, and again, I'm sure there's a few therapists, psychiatrists here who can illuminate this area, But it's very likely the case that it's because of the Western mentality of self-hatred, self-criticism, problems of guilt, of shame, of self-hatred, that's become a no-go area, or you don't make comments, you don't make people feel bad about their actions and speech because they're so prone to hating themselves anyway. Again, that's a bit of a sweeping statement, and I realize I'm being recorded and filmed. But that seems to be a very strong driving force because of the way the Western mentality relates to criticism, and so that in order to counteract that, personally, I feel, in my not particularly humble opinion, it's swung a bit too far, so that any comment about our behavior or our action is like anything that might be slightly critical is taken as a personal attack and something that's psychologically damaging. Now, I feel there's a very helpful distinction that can be made right at that point. Because, as I was saying about Hiri and Ottappa, they work by being painful. And I would say that the quality of the issues of shame and guilt and self-hatred, they're a lot to do with the mind getting, say, addicted and habituated to the habits of self-view. And then it's self-view woven together with regret or criticism, then they turn into this sort of toxic shame and toxic guilt. Just as an aside, a couple of stories in relationship to this. So I've told these stories a number of times before, but it was at the Harmonia Mundi conference, a huge conference in Southern California many years ago, and His Holiness the Dalai Lama was giving a talk there. And after he gave this talk, one of the people in the audience asked a question about self-hatred. And to say, Your Holiness, if you have a lot of self-hatred, a lot of self-criticism, how can you work with that? And then His Holiness said, forgive me if this is impolite or improper, but what have you done that you hate yourself for? Have you been in the military? Have you killed someone? Or have you stolen things? Said, oh, no, I'm a very good person. I never killed anyone. I've never broken the law. I just hate myself. And then the Dalai Lama kind of went, sort of puzzled look came over his face. He went into a huddle with his translator. And his translator was Thupten Jinpa, who was at that time he was doing a PhD in philosophy at Cambridge University, Western philosophy. So Thupten Jinpa gave him a quick rundown on the Western mind trap of self-hatred. He went into a huddle, and then they came out of the huddle, and His Holiness said, "This is most unfortunate." And then a very almost identical conversation happened here with Lumpur Panyananda in the early days of Amaravati. And he was giving a talk over in the old Sīla, which is currently being dismantled. And maybe one of you asked him a very, very similar question. Lumpur, what do you do about self-hatred, self-criticism? And he answered it a little bit differently. He said, self-hatred, it's a minor mental irritation, ignore it and it'll go away. And there was this blast of laughter from the whole group. Ha! You're joking. It was like a spontaneous roar, not quite a roar, but certainly a surge from the group of people gathered for that talk. Like, Lumpur, you do not know what we can do with our minds. That the capacity for self-hatred is very, very high, particularly in the Western world. So that's my one of my pet theories, is that it's because of that hypersensitivity or the tendency towards a lot of self-hatred that it's become the custom or the standard, the sort of legal standard that a therapist can't say, if you didn't cheat on your partner, you wouldn't have so much self-criticism. They're apparently, I'm very open to being corrected. It's not the therapist's role to say, if you weren't a bank robber or you weren't a mafioso, you would feel less anxiety, in your life. Like in The Sopranos, Tony Soprano famously visits his therapist a lot. I understand. I've never seen The Sopranos, but Thus have I heard that this mafioso, this mafia boss, spends a lot of time talking with his therapist. So anyway, I would say that in terms of developing relational intelligence, social intelligence, that we don't need to be afraid of those feelings of regret or of recognizing this is unskillful, this is unwholesome, because hiri and ottappa, they function without any aspect of self-view, without any I-making or mind-making. Just like physical pain, it works on the basis of the body and the nervous system, and we say, "Ow! I'm in pain," or "I feel hurt." We think that or we say that, but the pain process works without an ego, right? So the hiri and ottappa, they function and they are liberating and very much a protective quality, and to be cultivated, I would say, as much as possible, because they can be cultivated completely free of self-view, and so that there's not the mind grabbing hold of those qualities and saying, "I'm an awful person, I'm a terrible person, I shouldn't be this way, everyone hates me because I'm like this," and so on and so forth. And so I feel if we can make that distinction, we can tease those things apart, then we don't need to be afraid of judging the conduct that we follow, and that to see that wholesome conduct leads to bright and spacious, easeful states of mind, and unwholesome conduct and speech leads to stressful and painful and divisive and anxious and uncomfortable states of mind. That's the natural process. I would say that in meditation, some of the advice that I often give is around loving kindness, establishing loving kindness as a basis, and metta not just as a well-wishing to all beings, but metta as an open-heartedness. So that metta, I would say, has two aspects. And the first aspect is opening the heart to the way things are, the people around us, the world around us, the thoughts and feelings that arise within our own minds, and to have a completely open attitude to what we experience, to have metta for our mind states, even if our mind states are jealous, angry, selfish, irritable states. That to have an attitude of loving kindness is to say, well, here they are. And just as you accept the feelings of friendliness, of unselfishness and generosity, here they are. So the first part of that practice, I would say, in establishing metta, is a complete open-heartedness. Then the quality of wisdom comes in. The discrimination, I would say, as an aspect of loving kindness and an aspect of mindfulness, there is a natural wisdom which says this is unwholesome, this is wholesome. I would say that's an intrinsic part of genuine mindfulness and genuine loving kindness, is the wisdom element, the ability to discriminate, this is wholesome, this is unwholesome, this is neutral. So having opened the heart to everything within us, the feelings of kindness and generosity, the feelings of selfishness and jealousy and irritation, then that mindfulness and wisdom, that factor comes into play, and there's a discrimination. This is wholesome. If this is followed and developed, then this will lead to benefit for myself and other beings. Therefore, let this be given energy and let it be supported. So you cultivate the wholesome and sustain it in being. And then this is the unwholesome. This is aggressive. This is unkind. This is dishonest. This is going to have painful results for this being and other beings. Therefore, let this be relinquished and let go of. Let this not be given more energy. And again, that discrimination, it doesn't have to have any kind of selfing involved in it. Rather than, I've got to become good, I've got to hang on to this good quality, I've got to make more of my kindness and wisdom. Doesn't have to be an I or me or mine in there. Similarly, I've got to get rid of these jealous or angry feelings. I've got to be more. I've got to be more unselfish and generous. There doesn't have to be any I in there at all. Just like with Hiri and Ottappa, the cultivation of right effort, samma vayama, doesn't have any quality of self involved. So the restraining the unwholesome from arising, or if it's arisen, letting it go. Or the cultivation of the wholesome and maintaining it in being. There's no I or me or mine involved in that. Again, we'll have time for open things up for questions in a little while, but that I would suggest this is a key element of it. So that when we are talking about cultivating Sīla as a social or relational intelligence, then we don't need to be afraid of making choices. We don't need to feel, oh, I shouldn't be giving my life any direction at all. Any kind of desiring, any kind of choosing is somehow that's very dualistic. I would say, well, it's just like it's. Some kinds of dualism are useful. I'm facing the east, you're facing the west, so we can see each other. I'm giving the talk, you're listening. So that kind of duality, I'm here, you're there. There's nothing wrong with that duality, right? I would say. So we can get a bit over fussy, or taking the idea of not wanting to be dualistic or picking and choosing. We can take that very high-minded attitude and misuse it. Dualisms are quite handy. Which side of the road is the correct side of the road to drive on? In this country, on the left. Over in France, on the right. It's a useful dualism. It's not an absolute position in relationship to life. It's a useful discrimination to make. It's not anything intrinsically harmful or obstructive or problematic, I would suggest. So, again, making that discrimination, this is wholesome, therefore let it be boosted and sustained. This is unwholesome, therefore let it be relinquished and let go of. There's nothing say unspiritual or unskillful or problematic with that. And if we look at the Buddha's teachings, that's spelled out in a lot of over and over and over again in a lot of detail. This is wholesome, this is unwholesome, this is to be developed, this is to be abandoned. And so the Buddha's teaching helps us to work skillfully on the relative level, and that skillful working on the relative level helps the mind to eventually be able to understand and to know things on an ultimate level, on the lokuttara level, but to establish things in a skillful way on the relative level is an important first step. So then, in terms of Sīla, then hopefully that gives a bit of a picture and understanding Hiri-Ottappa as. So it really is a bit regrettable that you come across translations like moral dread. It's a little a bit you sort of feel the sort of Victorian schoolmaster leaning over you with a cane, so ready to punish you for your bad behavior, and the language is sort of threatening and ugly. But if you think in terms of the bright protectors, the guardians of the world, then it has a bit of a different tone. So I would encourage us to relate to these lokapala, these guarding principles, these guardians of the heart in this in a much more positive light. So also in terms of Sīla, again in a similar way, when we think about Sīla, most of us think, oh, the 5 precepts, and so don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. Like don't. 8 precepts, don't. Yeah, we have 227 up here. That's a lot of don'ts. Yeah, so that I would say another important thing to consider with Sīla as a new definition for intelligence. Or this Sīla as this sort of relational intelligence, The basis of Sīla isn't just the rules that are spelled out, the Sikkhapada. When we think of Sīla, that might be be the first things that come to mind. All the Panatipata, Viramani, Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami. So that is, I would say, the academic side or the conceptual side of Sīla. That's when it's spelled out and described in terms of an appropriate behavior. But the heart of Sīla is not the spelling out of the rules. I would say that the heart or the origin of Sīla is the quality of Bodhi itself, the awake, aware mind. And this is something that sometimes people miss. They think, Sīla is all the things that you shouldn't do, and then meditation and wisdom is something else. But I would say that the source of Sīla is the awakened mind itself, and this comes across in a number of teachings of the Lord Buddha that I like to emphasize. And also, there's a word in Pali, guna Dhamma, which again is not very well known, but in the Thai language, gunatam. So guna is a spiritual quality, like when we talk about the Buddha guna, Dhamma guna, Sangha guna, the qualities of the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. When we chant those, Itipiso Bhagava Arahang Sama Sambuddho, those are the Buddha guna, the qualities of the Buddha or the qualities of the Dhamma, Sanditiko, Akalika, apparent here and now, timeless, encouraging investigation. So guna, G-U-N with a dot underneath, guna, is a spiritual quality. So guna Dhamma is that quality, it's the virtue of the heart, it's that in your heart which loves the good. So the gunatam is not sort of virtue as in terms of the rules that you follow, but it's that quality of your heart that delights in goodness, that delights in unselfishness, that delights in honesty and generosity, both in yourself and in other people. Like this morning we were having a memorial and celebration of the life of His late Majesty King Bhumibol Adulyadej. We have the shrine for him here. Also, I was mentioning Queen Elizabeth, who, as people know, passed away very recently, and that quality of the gunatam, that in the heart which loves the good, and say these people in positions of great authority, great responsibility in society function very much as an embodiment, as an example of that quality of goodness, and the encouragement to be guided by that love of the good, gunatam. So I feel I'd like to bring that more into the Western usage of Buddhist language, gunadhamma, the love of the good, and rejoicing in goodness. And so like we're rejoicing in the goodness of King Bhumibol Adulyadej, rejoicing in the goodness of Queen Elizabeth. That's something that's delightful, it's enjoyable, we appreciate that, it's inspiring. So that gunadhamma is that love of the good. There's also a Western term from religious philosophy, which is synderesis. That's an even more unusual, very, very rarely used word in English. Synderesis, 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 which again means the love of the good, your own kind of fundamental moral sense of this is wholesome, this is beautiful, this is noble, this is unwholesome, this is destructive, this is painful. So when we consider that the source of Sīla, that source of that intelligence is the awake, aware mind, then the rules are a way of spelling out, okay, if the heart is fully attuned, if that gunadhamma is strengthened and is operating without obstruction, then you will not be interested in taking life of any other living being. You will not be acquisitive. You won't try and steal anything. You won't engage in sexual misconduct, and so forth. And that principle is spelled out in a couple of teachings I like to quote. One is called the Uposita Sutta. If you want to look these up, these are all in the numerical discourses. These ones, in the Book of the Eights, Sutta number 41, and I did look it up before today's talks. Don't be too impressed. So Suttas 41 and 42, they're very, very similar. And it's a description of the Buddha, of the Buddha's methodology of how he established the 8 precepts as a way for the lay community to observe the moon days. So it's like his own internal thinking. So he says, all their lives, the arahants, from the time of enlightenment until their passing away, they never deliberately take the life of another living being. Wouldn't it be useful for the lay community on this moon day, one day a week, if they adopt that behavior, then they will be living as the arahants do, and that will be for their long-lasting benefit and happiness. And similarly, all their lives, an arahant never steals anything. They don't engage in sexual activity. They never lie, and so forth, with the whole of the 8 precepts. So the basis of the 8 precepts as a weekly observance for the lay community is the natural conduct of the enlightened mind. So that's where it comes from. So it's spelled out as only eating in the morning time, or not wearing jewelry, or seeking entertainment, or not engaging in sexual activity. But it's saying, if the mind is totally enlightened, then it's impossible to tell a lie. You're not interested in sexual activity. If the mind is totally enlightened, you're not looking for distraction and entertainment. You're not looking to excite or charm other people, just distract the mind. You're not taking refuge in more sleep than you really need. So in that Uposita Sutta, then the Buddha spells that out. And there's also another couple of suttas where he is talking to 2 different wanderers from different spiritual groups. They're side by side in the Book of the Nines, Sutta number 7 and Sutta number 8. Again, I looked that up to get my numbers straight. So and one of these wanderers is called Suttava, and the other is called Sajja. And it's a very similar dialogue with the 2 of them. And the Buddha is saying how if someone is an arahant, it's impossible for them to deliberately take the life of another living being. They can't do that. It's not like there's a rule stopping them. It's like the hand cannot move to take the life of another being. They can't tell a lie. It's impossible to, the tongue won't form an untruth. It's impossible for them to lie. And so there's also very interesting discourses to take a look at. Interestingly, I think in the one to Suttava, the 5th precept is not about drugs and alcohol. After the first 4, about not killing, not stealing, not engaging in sexual activity, not lying, the 5th one is an arahant. All their lives from the time of enlightenment, an arahant will never lay up a store for the future. That you're prepared to live on what shows up today and what's going to happen tomorrow. Let it look after itself, which is similar to what you find in the New Testament, that the things of the morrow look after themselves. That's probably a misquotation, but my vague memories of somewhere in the New Testament, Jesus says something like that. So it's a very similar principle that the Buddha spells out in that sutta. So in these different teachings, it's pointed out how the root of Sīla is the awake mind. So if the heart is fully awake and aware, then it can't be destructive. It can't be disrespectful of the lives or the property of others. It can't. There's no interest and no ability to tell a lie, and so on and so forth. So I do feel that's helpful to understand when we talk about Sīla as a new definition of intelligence. In a way, the root of that is the awake, aware mind, and then the qualities of hiri and ottappa, that conscience or honor, that you can also translate hiri as honor or conscience, or an ottappa as consequential thinking. That is like the means whereby that awake, aware mind functions in relationship to the world, and it informs action and speech. So in applying or developing this kind of relational intelligence, the social intelligence, the Sīla as a basis, then what are the results of that? What are the effects if we are living intelligently, kind of quote unquote, in this way? If we cultivate this kind of intelligence, what are the effects of that? And again, another interesting sutta that I like to quote with respect to Sīla, again, because we often think of Sīla as don't do this, don't do that, don't, all that kind of, all those no's. Sometimes people think of the Buddha as the one who knows, no. The one who says no. But there's a very interesting sutta called the streams of merit, so like the currents or the rivers of punya, of merit, of boon. And the Buddha says there are these 8 streams of merit, which are these powerful currents of blessing and benefit in our lives. The first 3 are taking refuge in Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. So that's the first 3 of the 8. And then the last 5 are the 5 precepts, as people are familiar with, I'm sure. So he said, and he calls these the 5 great gifts, Mahadana. Because these are the 5 great gifts, the 5 precepts. Because if you take the precept to not take life, then you grant to other living beings immeasurable, incalculable freedom from distress, freedom from fear, freedom from anxiety. And in turn, you grant yourself immeasurable freedom from fear, freedom from distress, freedom from anxiety. So it's a gift you're giving to other beings. When you come in the room or you come nearby, they don't have to run away from you. That the animals that live around Amaravati, they know they're not going to be harmed. In fact, if they come near Ajahn Kongrit, they'll probably get fed. He's got a whole family of badgers that regularly visit his kuti, and don't mind me mentioning your badger family. So that they know. And then, outside my kuti, often there's pigeons just sort of lounging around on the grass, and they kind of get up and waddle away a little bit, but they don't sort of, oh my goodness, it's one of those dangerous 2-leggeds with the sticks that go bang. That they're kind of casual. In the early days at Chithurst, there used to be a huge rabbit population in the monastery, and the rabbits got so casual, they'd be just lying on the grass. They wouldn't even sit up to eat the grass, they'd be lying on their side. Like they're at a Roman banquet, lying on their sides, nibbling the grass. And you just walk within about 3 or 4 feet of them, and they'd maybe give you a look, but they weren't afraid. So that's a wonderful thing, that the animals are not afraid. You're giving them fearlessness. It's called abhayadana. Abhayadana. So in this sutta, the streams of merit, the Buddha points out, if you don't steal, if you refrain from stealing, taking what is not given, then you grant immeasurable freedom from fear, freedom from distress, freedom from anxiety to immeasurable beings. People, when you come in the room, people don't have to hide their handbag under the chair or put the silver away if you're coming to visit. They know they don't have to worry about you. If you're in the workplace, people if they know that you don't lie or you don't gossip, they're happy to talk with you. They're not worried that what you're telling them is a lie to get some sort of advantage, or to impress them, or to cheat them, or to deceive them for whatever reason. And that creates a zone of trust, a zone of blessing. So that the Buddha says these 8 streams of punya, streams of blessing, great rivers, currents of blessing in our lives. So we don't usually think about the 5 precepts as great gifts. We think of them as limitations mostly, but they are these mahadana, these great gifts that the Buddha describes. So I feel it's skillful to think of them in that way. And then another of the effects of developing this kind of relational intelligence. I haven't coined that word, that phrase. It's social intelligence and relational intelligence. They're terms that are around in the field already. But I do think it's quite a good way of relating to Sīla as in its role in our cultivation of skillful living. That the Buddha said in another teaching in the Book of the Tens, in the numerical discourses, he said, if you live in a morally sensitive way, if you live according to the precepts, if you cherish Sīla, then there's no need to think, may I be free from remorse, because it's natural for one who lives in a moral and honest, honourable way. The heart is free from remorse. There's no remorse. He said, then for one who is free from remorse, there's no need for them to wish, may I experience delight, pamoja. It's natural for one who is free from remorse to feel delight, or you could say self-respect is another also Western psychological way of phrasing it. So pamoja, sense of delight or ease, within yourself. And then he said, so one who feels that quality of delight or self-respect, there's no need for them to say, may I experience joy, rapture, piti, rapture. So one who experiences delight and joy, there's no need for them to wish, may my body be relaxed, because it's natural. It's in accordance with nature that one who feels self-respect and feels joy, their body will be relaxed. And one whose body is relaxed, there's no need for them to think, may I experience contentment, sukha. One whose body is relaxed naturally feels contentment, sukha, happiness. And then he goes on to say, one who feels sukha, experiences sukha, there's no need for them to think, may my mind be concentrated, because it's natural. It's in accordance with nature that one who experiences contentment, naturally their mind is easily concentrated. And for one whose mind is concentrated, there's no need for them to think, may insight arise, may knowledge and vision of the way things are arise. He said, for one whose mind is concentrated, it's natural for knowledge and vision of the way things are to arise. And for one in whom knowledge and vision arises, and there's no need for them to think, may I let go, may I be unentangled, dispassionate, may I be free from grasping, because it's natural. If there's insight, if the mind sees the way things are, then letting go and non-grasping, non-entanglement is the natural result of that. And for one whose heart is free of grasping and entanglement, who's dispassionate, there's no need for them to wish, may I realize the knowledge and vision of liberation, because for one who whose heart is unentangled, who has that quality of dispassion and coolness, it's natural for knowledge and vision of the way things are to arise, and knowledge and vision of liberation. So, at the very root of that whole 10-part sequence, there is Sīla. Right? That's the very basis of it. And this quite a well-known teaching, often called liberation is a natural process. And right at the very basis of it, and I would say also why when people come to the monastery, particularly on the weekend, determining the refuges and precepts is an kind of automatic part of coming to the monastery. It's like setting those things in place so that you're re-establishing those principles, and that we use the wording of it, repeating the formula of Panatipata Viramani, I undertake the precept to refrain from taking the life of any living creature. We're saying the words in order to remind ourselves of that inner quality, of that in us which wishes no harm to any other being, physically or verbally. That the spelling out of the precepts in terms of the words are. They are not really receiving the precepts, but more reminding ourselves of our own true heart, our own good heart, and that like I was saying this morning, that golden quality of the heart, that indestructible aspect of the heart's pure natural wisdom, letting that function, letting that operate. So then we are able to, in that way, to live in a manner that's very effective, very harmonious, and a great blessing to this being and to all other beings. So I offer these thoughts for consideration this afternoon. That's it, yep. Go ahead.
Okay. I actually understood personally what you were talking about the whole time, because I've lived a lot in the negative side of what you were talking about, but I've also experienced the side where I seem to have that energy, that sense of having that relationship intelligence. And when that comes to me, which comes to me all too infrequently, life seems sort of magical and everything seems better. And I think this is wonderful. I want to stay in this forever. And then very, very quickly, it seems to sort of vanish and I go back to the way I was. And I think, well, why on earth did this happen? Because everything felt better.
Yes.
Every part of my being wanted to stay there. That's the way it's sensed anyway. But I still go back. So that's the first thing. If we can shine any enlightenment on that aspect of it, and the sort of follow-up bit is really, how is it possible to actually spend more time, more and more and more time in that wonderful intelligence?
Yes, well, there's the simple answer in terms of Buddhist psychology is avijja, ignorance. And that's what keeps distracting the attention and the habits of mind. A Western way of talking about it is the imp of the perverse. When everything is perfect and special and good, then the imp of the perverse says, "Take a left." And part of us doesn't really want it to end and is really enjoying it, but some perverse, and I think that expression, the imp of the perverse, has arisen because human society has recognized that all over the planet for many generations. It's kind of weird. It doesn't make sense. It's not logical, but it happens. And part of it, I think, is because the mind is not just a single thing, more like a committee or a collection of different influences. And so some members of the committee are saying, "This is great, this is just exactly what I wanted, this is a dream come true." Right. And then another member of the committee is saying, "I don't like it, I don't want it, I'm not going to let it happen." And it's so a lot of the practice of Dhamma is learning to listen to those different voices in the committee and learning from what happens. So if a wholesome impulse is followed, and we see the good result of that, then recognizing, oh well, if this is followed, this is what happens. Okay, this is delightful. This is pleasant, and then not adding on to that. Oh, now I've really got it downhill from here on. This is going to be a breeze. Like, don't add that on, but rather, okay, this is heading in a good direction. This is delightful. This is beautiful. Full stop. And then if you take an unskillful direction, okay, well, this is painful. This is exactly what I didn't want. Why did I do that again? And rather than dwelling on that and saying, I'm a terrible person, how could I do that? I said I'm never going to do that again. Then, okay, this was done. Here's the cause. Here's the effect. Full stop. So that's what I was saying about hiriyottapa. It's like consequential thinking. It's like, here's the cause, here's the effect. That's all. If they see that a wholesome cause has a beneficial effect, right. An unwholesome cause has a painful effect, right. And then those speak for themselves. When it comes to all the I-making and my-making and the conceptual proliferation, it tends to make it much more tangled and complicated. But in terms of developing the inclination towards what's beneficial and wholesome, the more simple we can keep it, and the more uncluttered that consequential thinking is. Like, here's the cause, here's the effect. So rather than, I'm a terrible person, how could I do that again? And well, wait. This was done, this is what was said, here's the result. Ow. Full stop. Just let that have its own effect. And so that's how that's developed. And then the other way of developing that as a sort of strengthening the quality of the wholesome is not to blow our own trumpet, but keep showing up at a place like Amaravati. being around good people, being around like-minded people. If you spend your time pinned to the news, then that'll have its effect. That's the cause. There's the effect. Not saying that we shouldn't be aware of what's going on in the world, but how many hours a day do we have to be filling the mind with the details? And then you come to a monastery on a Sunday afternoon, listen to a talk, be around good-hearted, like-minded people. What's the effect of that? Right, yes. So the Buddha praised the association with wise people, sappurisa sangseva. That's kind of number one on the list of beneficial supports. So spending time with good people, that's another major support. So please, any other questions? Yes. If you could use the microphone, please.
Hello, Bhante. Thank you for the talk. Yes, I was wondering, with Hiri and Ottappa, how can you stop it from being a double-edged sword? The uncomfortableness, the fear of doing something in the future protects the community and yourself. But then when you look back at what you've done, the same Hiri and Ottappa can make you feel uncomfortable and self-loathing and disrupt your metta for yourself when you look back and see what you've done in the past. Isn't there a danger there?
Well, the danger is the self-view taking over the picture. Like if you look back at your past, at something unskillful that you've done, if that was done by somebody that you knew, or something that you read about in the newspaper or on the news, that person A did such and such, this was the result, then how would you relate to that? You'd say, oh, that was very stupid, or that was unkind, full stop. Because it's got your name on it, because I did that, it's, I shouldn't have done that, I'm a terrible person, then all that I-making and mind-making gets added on. The more that we can simply recognize, it's not a lack of taking responsibility, but it's in a way seeing this was done, choices were made at that time, and this was the result. It was unskillful, it was dishonest, it was unkind, or whatever. And these were the painful results. Here's the cause, here's the effect. So it's not a kind of clever way of being irresponsible, but rather it's saying, if somebody else had done this, how would I feel about it? You think, well, there's a natural criticism, but it's and it's saying, yeah, that's not beautiful, that's really unskillful, but we don't take it personally. So in exactly the same way, we can look at our own actions, our own choices, and not take them personally. Similarly, our achievements, the things that we're proud of and that we really want to tell everyone about, if somebody else had done that's okay, he got a book published, oh yeah, okay, so he got a promotion, big deal, and that we can look at our own life and think, big deal. And something in us enjoys or delights in that, the ego not being inflated. So it's not just with negative actions, it's also learning not to take things that we read as positive in a personal way either. And so it's not, one of the most insightful, helpful statements by a Western philosopher was by George Santayana, who said, "Those who do not learn from the past are condemned to repeat it." So it's good to learn from the past. And in a way, if we see actions that we've taken that were really painful, it's useful to visit that, not to create more self-hatred or self-criticism, but to learn the lesson. Okay, that was really painful. That had some negative results. Okay, let's learn, let's be informed by that, so that if the mind starts inclining towards something similar in the future, then it's like, no, I'm not interested in going there. I'm not going to take that turn because I know where it goes. So that the whole manner of relating to our past achievements and successes and our past disasters and and difficulties, it's taken from a very different perspective. So it's all the I making and mind making that's the troublemaking. So it's useful. I mean, it's like the night of the Buddha's enlightenment. It just describes how he replayed like hundreds of thousands of his past lifetimes, and he wasn't always behaving well in those lifetimes. In his long career as a bodhisattva, as it said in the teachings, he broke all the precepts. The only precept he didn't break was against lying. He never told a lie during those countless lifetimes. But all the other precepts he broke. So he was remembering the lessons that were learned from the good things that were done, like the benefits of practicing loving kindness or generosity, and also the results of acting in a way that's greedy or deceptive or selfish, manipulative, destructive. He was a warrior, noble king in many lifetimes. So it's useful to learn from the past, but the important thing is not to take it personally.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bandana. Thank you very much to give a chance to talk and question. Well, I have one question on behalf of my wife. She couldn't sleep last 1 month. So due to her, she can't under control her stress. And when she closed her eyes, she seen the previous negative everything what happened. And when she closed her eyes, she seen only the bad things what happened previously before. Then we been to the doctor and the hospital, and they gave some sleeping pill, stress-free, some medication, which is not effective, and still she's suffering, and she just sometimes exciting and angry herself, and a little bit. She is always crying now all the time and sometimes she shaking. Sometimes when she understand, she calm down, and again and she is scared about that she can't sleep. That's why she will be mad or crazy or what will be happen or she's gonna die. So she doesn't know what she's gonna do, and she's very scared, and she doesn't know what will be happen. She is my wife here. So please, any answer from our Buddhism, our Buddha philosophy, say about it. Thank you very much.
Well, there's a lot of things there. I think one of the things I was talking about earlier is it's important to have loving kindness to not just to other beings, but to our own mind states. That if we are afraid of something or we push it away, we make it stronger. And so sometimes just to try and have a quality of open-heartedness. I mean, I'm not a psychiatrist or a medical practitioner, so I can only give advice in terms of meditation. But that I would say that readiness to open the heart, to acknowledge, I have a body, I have a mind, so that it can experience a big variety of different things. Some pleasant things, some painful things, some things that we can understand, some things we can't understand. Here it is. Life has many complex qualities. And so that loving kindness, metta, is a recognition that all these different things that we experience are part of nature. Having been born, mostly we can't tell where things come from. I would say 99.9% of the time, why we experience what we do is a mystery. Not just for you and your family, everybody. And maybe 0.1% is like, okay, this has come from there. 99.9% is like, why do I experience that? Or why do I feel this way? Or why did that thought come up in my mind just now? And it's mysterious. That's the same for most people, I would say. A lot of life is mysterious. And so establishing that quality of openness, readiness to this is what right now life is like this, and it's not pleasant. It's not what we would like, but here it is. In this moment, it's this way. And then in that, you're also doing what you can to let go of the past, let go of the future, not worrying about what it's going to be like next week or in the future, but rather, okay, in this moment, there is these feelings, these mental images, or this mood. In this moment, it's like this. And I don't understand where it's coming from, I don't understand what it might mean, but here it is, it's like this in this moment. And that simplicity and straightforwardness is what I would recommend, because it's where the mind creates a long story. Oh, what's it going to be like in the future? Or where's this going to go? Or this is this is a permanent problem. Then the mind creates more difficulty. If we have mindfulness and loving kindness, then we can find the attention to the present.
Hello, Ajahn. Thank you very much for your talk. I just wanted to say what you were saying about having problems with nasty dreams and sleeping and stuff like that. It's in a sutta, the Buddha said specifically one of the 11 benefits of metta bhavana is, I guess it would be 3 of them would be you sleep well, you have no evil dreams, and you wake in comfort as well. So,
yeah, more when it comes to metta, more is better. This is the slogan. That's the slogan for next year's T-shirt. When it comes to metta, more is better. So there's many benefits from that. So that, but it's more than just thinking the word metta. It's the feeling. That openness of heart is really the important. It's the real ground of metta, is that open-hearted quality. But thank you for that. That's helpful.
That's okay. No, I just wanted to ask as well. It's kind of. Oh no, that's okay. I'll leave it. Thank you, Bante.
This gentleman with a white T-shirt had a question.
Thank you, Bante. This question is actually related to a talk you gave in October 2021 titled Holy Shift, the Liberation of Stream Entry, Bante. In that I sent you a question, Bante, and you gave the question, the gist of the question.
You can hold the microphone closer so we can hear.
Yeah. The gist of the question was the importance of the Noble Eightfold Path for stream entry. The gist of it. The question is a bit long, so I'll just tell you the gist, Bante. You gave a great answer, but in the answer, Bante, you gave 2 sutta references. Like you said that you can practice the Noble Eightfold Path in a mundane mode, and the sutta numbers you gave Majjhima Nikaya 113 and 137. But Bante, I've read both the suttas. I couldn't find what I was looking for. I have a feeling that Bante meant a different sutta there, but the number was incorrect. So that's my question. Just to, I can read the question if it doesn't.
Yeah, I was not remembering the number. I think the sutta is called the Great 40. But maybe there's a Pali scholar here who knows which number. 137. So anyways, I think it's called the Great 40, and it talks about the mundane Eightfold Path and the supramundane Eightfold Path.
Okay, because 137 is Salayatana Vibhanga Sutta. I think the sutta you are referring to must be the right one, Bhante. Thank you so much.
Very good. I'm impressed you remembered it from that long ago. Yes.
Can I just ask about 2 or 3 quick-fire ones? So the Moon Day precepts for lay people, so they come here and keep the 8 precepts. So could we, if we don't come here, could we still keep the 8 precepts on the Moon Day? Is that something that Buddha suggested, or is it only if you come to a temple?
No, it's a totally open field. You can keep them any way you like on the moon if you wish. Yeah.
So once a week, because in Western society we rest on Sundays, but is it better to rest on the moon day or Sunday, or up to the person?
It's up to your individual judgment, whatever fits in with your routine and your work life.
Fine. Okay.
If you're in the restaurant business, Mondays are open.
True. Hiriotapa, what's this? Is there a source in one of the suttas or something about Hiriotapa? Did you mention where it comes from, or is it came later?
There's a number of places. Well, in the Itivuttaka,
Yeah.
which is one of the collections of teachings, there are the Buddhist. He uses that term, the bright protectors, to describe Hiri and Ottappa. I couldn't tell you which number because I didn't look it up today.
Fine.
But if you look in the Itivuttaka, and that's sometimes translated as "thus it was said," or the Buddha's words, but the Itivuttaka, Itivuttaka.
I can probably search it and find it, but now I know where it is. And then last, self-hatred. Those people have self-hatred. I've suffered from that too a bit. And is that like Mara, isn't it? The inner critical voice or whatever. That's the source of the self-hatred generally. Would you say that's true?
It's woven in. That it's the basic conditioning of mind to focus on the patterns of self-centered thinking. So, Mara is an embodiment of sort of delusion and that I-making and mind-making is a principal tool of that sort of delusory motivation in the mind. But there's a very, very strong quality, and particularly in the sort of Western Judeo-Christian conditioning. On the Catholic side, you have original sin, which was, I think, invented by St. Augustine. Well, not invented, but I think he came up with the term, St. Augustine. And then also in the various aspects of Judeo-Christian conditioning, there's the way that you relate to yourself is in a fundamentally negative way, like or even Freud, who wasn't being religious, but he talked about the id as quote unquote the black tide of mud, the basis of our being. So that's pretty grim.
Yikes!
And also, not to malign Freud, but I studied psychology in university. And so when in the first year, we had some lectures on Freud, and I remember the lecturer telling us that the final passage, or the kind of denouement of Freud's first book, The Interpretation of Dreams, was something. It was obviously in German, but the English translation is: "The best that my method can do is to transform your neurotic misery into ordinary human unhappiness." And I heard that, and something in me just snapped. Like, no, we can do better than that. I mean, I was an 18-year-old, ready to explain the universe to everybody, but that was like, no, that if that's the best you can do, sorry, mate. Yeah. But that was my first year in college, so it was like, okay, I had to stay with it for another 2 years to graduate, but I managed to endure just about. But that kind of attitude percolates through a lot of the Western conditioning, and so and it was interesting that the responses that both Luang Por Panyananda and His Holiness the Dalai Lama gave to those comments. Also, many years ago, in the early days of Chithurst, there was a Sri Lankan novice there who was a student of Ajahn Amaro, and quite innocently, after one evening Dhamma talk, he said, I don't know why Ajahn Amaro keeps going on about self-hatred. I quite like myself. I'm not a bad person. Why would I hate myself? And he was really quite puzzled. Like, why does he keep talking about self-hatred? This is so strange. And the other Europeans around him going, where do we begin? Yeah. So I'm not to typecast everybody, but it is a strong current, and that that basic habit, it's like a very, very strong habit, an assumption that gets woven into things, that you're bad and you're wrong and you should be scolded, and that goodness is going to come from somewhere outside you. It's not going to come from inside you. And that so that takes a lot of unpicking, deconditioning.
I'd say that Confucianism also gives that kind of, Confucianism gives someone like me, a Chinese descent, that right and wrong. My final sort of thing about Mara Hiriotapa is people often say they feel very self-righteous, like saying, for example, here, I think LGBTQ people, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer people feel very welcome. But often people will say, oh, that's wrong. And, so that sense that it's wrong, does that come from a misunderstanding of Hiriotapa? Or is that, again, Mara? Or is it something else?
It would depend on the individual and the motivation in that moment. You can't generalize.
Okay.
So,
but it's never Hiriotapa, is it? That hatred for other people.
Hiriotapa's there's no aversion in it. It's pain. It works by being painful. There's no hatred in it. It's no aversion. But it does its job by being uncomfortable.
So hatred would be a different, perhaps
totally
a different
yeah.
source. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yes, there's a question behind you. The gentleman in the blue shirt.
Thank you very much, Ajahn Amaro. I'm sorry, I probably missed up the first part of your talk. Came in late. My question is keeping the 5 precepts at home and in the workplace. It's very challenging, and it obviously is easier to practice in an environment here in a monastery with and living with people, surrounding with good people. But in our society, we still see people try to avoid, try to find a loophole. For example,
say that again.
Try to find a loophole.
Oh yeah, loopholes. Yeah.
Yeah. For example, avoid politician, speech, or someone try to avoid paying tax. For example, in a workplace, if you say the 5 precepts is good, but someone always take advantage over you, and if you don't mind, and then you end up with overwhelming, you just accept as it is. And I just want to know, in the society, how you see this as a Buddhist, keeping the 5 precepts, how you go about this?
Well, it's a good question. The simple answer is you do the best you can. What I was saying about associating with good people, sapurisa sangseva, that's the first of the supportive conditions for stream entry. And so when I've emphasized that, people say, "Oh, but Ajahn, you need to meet my family, or you should meet the people I work with." We can't always choose who we associate with. But to a degree, I would say we can. So who do you choose to spend time with? Who do you draw close to? And to a degree, we can't. Who are you going to stand next to on the tube? Who you've signed a contract and someone is your boss, and okay, they're your line manager, so that's who you have to relate to because that's the job. So to a degree, we can't control it. To a degree, we can, but it's also the degree to which we really let someone into our heart or let someone get to us. And so if we're in a situation like someone in your family is dishonest or cruel, and that if you're in the family together, then it's a challenge. Okay, how do I not associate with this person who's a close relative? So it's neither pushing away nor grasping hold, but to the degree possible, just keeping your relationship respectful and functional, and it's not letting their choices affect you. You're obviously connected, you're related. If someone's breaking the law or harming other people, then you have to consider, well, do you tell the authorities or not? Do you tell the person, look, I can't turn a blind eye to what you're doing? Sometimes it's much more blurry than that. But oftentimes when someone is upsetting or burdensome to us, we spend more time thinking about the people that we dislike and have got problems with than the people that we do like and are beneficial. We carry the problematic people around, and so we're actually creating them. We're giving them energy. We're giving that person strength in our life by thinking, he shouldn't do that. How can he do that? That's terrible. So you're actually investing in that person and giving them strength in your life by the amount you carry them around internally. So it's not just a matter of not talking to them or avoiding them socially or keeping it clinical when you talk. It's also the amount we carry people around within us, and that that takes a bit of training, a bit of practice in meditation, but it helps enormously to not be carrying people around, or to be noticing when you think, I'm spending half my day thinking about that bloke. Okay, so take note of that. Do I really want to build my life around this person? And to do what you can to let go. And then sometimes the livelihood that we have. When I lived in California, there was a whole group, a Buddhist lawyers group in San Francisco. There was a lot of conversation about the fourth precept, the right speech, not lying. So, Ajahn, according to California law, a lawyer has to vigorously defend the interests of their client. So, vigorously defend the interests. So, Ajahn, sometimes, many conversations about how to be a lawyer and not tell lies. And so that it was sort of interesting discussions. I mean, lawyers are chatty people, often. So interesting discussions, but often what the outcome was that people went from being a criminal prosecution lawyer to being a public defender. There would be a lawyer for people who couldn't afford lawyers. It was available to be making a case for people who hadn't got the financial resources to run a court case for themselves. But it's challenging if that's the very job that you've trained and signed up to is your skill is being manipulative with your speech, or economical with the truth, as a British parliamentarian famously once put it. I wasn't lying, I was merely being economical with the truth, trying to make it sound like a virtue, like being economical with the truth. So people make their own choices about the jobs that they have. I don't make those choices for people. But if you're in a situation where then it's a sort of daily struggle to keep the precepts and live in a skillful way, then it's useful to think, well, okay, do I have to be in this livelihood? Do I have any other choices? Because what I'm doing, the livelihood I'm doing at the moment, doesn't seem to have any way around compromising my conduct. And so, should I think about doing something else? So, I feel it's skillful to look at things in that way. It does sometimes, even though you might be in some kind of challenging situation, or might seem to be quite a destructive situation, sometimes you can be a force for good within that. It's a bit of an extreme example, but many years ago I met Bill Ford, who was he was the CEO of the Ford Motor Company at that time. And it was interesting because he was a sort of a kind of liberal-minded, friendly sort of fellow. And so at the beginning, the family only trusted him to look after the charitable activity. It's like, well, just give him the charities because he's not a hard-edged executive. But eventually, because he was such a nice guy and so honest and reliable, that he kept saying, well, look, Bill could do it. Bill could do it. So eventually he got appointed the CEO of the whole company for some time because he was trustworthy. and really a caring person. When they had a disaster at the I think the Rouge River plant, he went straight out to the plant. It was a huge accident. Workers were injured there. And he went straight to the plant. And they said, "No, you're the CEO. You can't do that. You've got to keep a distance." He said, "Shut up. I'm going." So I was introduced to him through someone in the Buddhist group in Michigan, in the Detroit area. And so he was quite torn about being the chief executive officer of a giant automobile manufacturing company, with pollution and the whole economics of Ford Motor Company and such like. And so here I am, a Buddhist monk. I'm invited into his home and we're chatting, and I think he was saying, well, what I'd really like to do is to go off to Vermont and live in a cottage in the woods and bring my kids up, in a Waldorf school, growing carrots and cabbages, in a vegetable garden. That's what I'd really like. And I think he was expecting me to say, yes, good idea. Bail out of the whole Ford Motor Company and go and grow carrots and cabbages and live in the Vermont countryside. But to his surprise, and kind of my surprise too, I said, well, you are in a position of great authority and responsibility, so perhaps you can do some good within the Ford Motor Company. You're a very kind person, you're very compassionate, very thoughtful, people really trust you, you're very honest, and so perhaps that's something that you can help introduce and give more strength to in the Ford Motor Company. So I think he was a little bit disappointed with you could be the bodhisattva of the Ford Motor Company, and that he was. I wasn't sort of going along with his yes, go off to Vermont and grow carrots, but I did feel it was a very strong intuitive feeling. Like someone like that, if they're given a position of authority, then they can be an influence for a lot of good. They can put things in place that affect a lot of people in a very beneficial way. And so he's not the CEO anymore. He did it for, I think, about 10 years and then stepped down. But during that time, I did notice that he managed to bring in a few kind of helpful, skillful changes. He blew people's minds at the AGM, apparently. He began his speech by saying, Ford Motor Company is not about making vehicles. It's like, so then I think the people in suits were very anxious at that moment. He said, really, what I see that we're doing is trying to help people get where they want to go. Isn't that right? Words to that effect. I can't quote him exactly. But I thought, wow, good job. Yeah, well done. That he is taking that position of trust and authority and just using that to steer things in a bit of a more helpful direction, to some degree. So sometimes in the workplace, even if it's a challenging situation, rather than just bailing out because we've got difficult people to work with, perhaps our ethics and our standards can be something that is helpful to others in the workplace. Maybe we don't even realize. If you tell I don't know about what your workplace is like, but if you say to your friends, I'm thinking of quitting, they might say, don't go, you're the only sane person here. Without you, it's going to be dreadful. Oh, really? I'm not trying to project, onto your workplace. I have no idea what it would be, but sometimes it's like that. So it's not just what we get from the workplace or how it affects us, but our standards affect the people around us. And like I was saying earlier about abhayadana, you can be a blessing to the people around you. And without even realizing it. I mean, not going around like, I'm a blessing to you. You're so lucky to have me working with you. Like the kind of egotistical statement, but rather just seeing that our standards can have a beneficial effect on people, and that it's not just a one-way thing. So 4:00 has come around, so I will leave it there for today. And thank you for your attention and your good questions. And this is the last of the Sunday talks for this year, so they will begin again at the start of the Vasa next year. But there are other talks on the moon days and other times, so please do come along and make use of this fine place as and when you wish.